Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Forgive us our sins as our sins are forgiven. Lord, you have provided us with many blessings. For this, we are so grateful. Also, you know of our needs. I ask for healing for those who have been mentioned and non-mentioned. Relieve the suffering and provide healing. We ask this all in the name of Jesus. And now, as we learned last week, I'd like to give a blessing from 2 Thessalonians. May the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times and in every way. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, George. Great prayer. It's great to see you back and healthy. I'm glad your CUC endowment vote went the way you wanted it to. I don't know what your prayer would have been like if it had. So we're happy about that. Okay, for our speaker this morning, it is Dean Tucker. I know a little bit about Dean, but I've learned a little bit, but he'll probably want to introduce more of himself. He's originally from Ashland, Ohio, been married to his wife, Sarah, for 46 years. He has a bachelor, master's, and a doctorate degree, and has worked in private industry, local, state, and federal government, and a long time in academia, and 4 universities, and the last being in Oglethorpe, which might have started about the time he moved here. He's been a member of RUMC since 1985. So Dean, come on forward. If there's anything you'd like to else you'd like to share with the class, don't make it too personal, but we're very happy to have you here this morning, and thank you for being our guest speaker.
Well, thank you again for asking me back. I don't know whether that's a good sign or you're just glutton for punishment. I haven't decided yet which it is. But George here in front of me, yes, you, Mr. Reed, he's responsible for me being here today because he was the one that asked me if I would do some research and present my research findings to you on the Apocrypha. And he's been after me for a long time to do that. So this is dedicated to you, George. And I guess you can tell from the introduction, all the jobs I've had, I just can't hold a job. That's my problem. But today, what I want to talk to you about is the Apocrypha. I have been asked to give this presentation today and also next Sunday. So we're going to sort of break it down into a couple sections. I'm not going to be able to cover completely the Apocrypha. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got the Apocrypha, sort of the history of it, give you a background, why we chose the name Apocrypha as the name for these particular books that are found in some of the Bibles. Other Bibles do not have them. And then I thought that on next Sunday, what I could do is actually go through some of the books. There are 14 books, so we can't go through all 14 books, even with 2 sessions. But I want to give you sort of an idea of what is in each of the books. And a little bit about the author, if we know who the author was. I'll give you some dates today, but basically the Apocrypha was put together over a 400-year stretch of time. So with that as sort of the introduction here, first of all, why do we call it the Apocrypha? The Apocrypha comes from the Greek word apokryphos, and what it means is hidden, concealed, or obscured. because a lot of these writings were very obscure. They were hidden from the then common man that would be reading the Bible. So how did this come about? We have to go back to the year 382 AD, when Pope Dominicus I asked Jerome. Everybody knows Jerome, Saint Jerome. He's the one that did one of the first translations. The Pope asked him to do a translation of then everything that was in Greek and put it into Latin. It took him some time to do this, and we finally finished in 405 AD is when he had come up with what is known as Jerome's Latin Vulgate, which is the Bible that the Roman Catholic Church uses. It's based upon it. There were translations from his translation because he was translating from the Greek to the Latin. So he was the one who developed this Vulgate, what they call the Vulgate. Vulgate meaning common Bible. What he did was a little bit different than what other people have done or had done prior to him. Most of the people went to Alexandria, Egypt, because that's where a lot of the manuscripts were kept. And so from those manuscripts, which originally were written in Hebrew, and then they were translated into the Greek, that's Septuagint, what we call the Septuagint. People would go to that in order to make translations. Well, Jerome decided that he wasn't going to go to Alexandria. He was going to go to Palestine. And he was going to look at the documents that were there. And he started his translation, but after a while, he discovered that there were 14 books missing in the Palestinian information than what was included in the Alexandrian. And it turns out those 14 books became then what we know as the Apocrypha. The question arose when he discovered these 14 books was, what was the status of these books? You know, were they the inspired word of God? You know, who wrote them? And that was a little bit of a mystery for him. So what he did is because of the mystery, it got the name Apocrypha, which, as I mentioned, means hidden, concealed, or obscured. And so he called it the Apocrypha because he didn't know what these 14 books were. But he went ahead and translated them and put them into his Vulgate Bible. And that's how then eventually the Catholic Church incorporated it in all the other Bibles that they have. So the belief of these 14 books was that they had been written by various scholars, and that these scholars were not writing for the people of their time, but what they were writing was things that were obscured and could only happen in the future. And therefore, we have to wait for somebody who has the knowledge, or some people that have the knowledge, to be able to understand and explain the Apocrypha. So that's how the Apocrypha got started here. What happened was that this Apocrypha eventually, Apocryphus as they originally called it, became the Apocrypha. Apocrypha is from the medieval Latin that Jerome gave to the name. And it means secret, of doubtful authenticity, questionable of value, and an uncanonized writing. Because we discovered that these had not gone through the process of canonization. So that's what the Apocrypha really was that particular unknown. And that is from the Latin called scripta Apocrypha, which means that. Now, as I mentioned, there were 14 books, and these books have been written over a period of 400 years, beginning approximately 300 BC and going through 100 AD. That was the writings. And the Christian churches, not all Christian churches accept the Apocrypha. And in fact, it's few in number. If we look at, well, the first time that it appeared in the Christian Bible was in the year 1534, and that was in the Luther Bible. When Luther translated the Bible, he did not include the Apocrypha in the Bible itself. So that is what happened originally with the Apocrypha. To tell you what Christian denominations accept the Apocrypha, out of the millions and millions of Christian, Catholic, Jewish traditions, there are several million that accept the Apocrypha, and it is included in their particular Bibles. The Roman Catholic Church accepted the Apocrypha as part of the Bible on April 8th, 1546. And that was the Council of Trent. And so from that time forward, the Apocrypha has been included in any Bible that the Roman Catholic religion has. So
when did Luther translate it?
Luther translated his, you asked me ahead of time, too far.
I think you said
I wanted, it was in the late 1400s. But it was 1534 is when he published the Bible. And that's when it first appeared in what we would probably call the Protestant Bible. Because the Bible, Protestants used to have it in their Bible. Today, very few people have it in their Bible. So what happened was the Roman Catholic Church in 1546 adopted the Apocrypha. It became part of their Bible. Today, the formal canonization of the Bible and acceptance, well, put it this way, the churches that use the Apocrypha are the Roman Catholic churches and the Orthodox churches. And as far as it being canonized, the earliest was, of course, when Jerome included it in his particular, it was kind of informally canonized. But when we look at the Orthodox churches, the Greek Orthodox, there are three different types of Orthodox churches: the Greek Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox, and then the Asian Orthodox. The Greek Orthodox accepted it as part of their Bible in 1950. In 1956, the Russian Orthodox accepted it into their Bible. And the Oriental Orthodox Church, I was unable to find an exact time when it was accepted, but it was all around there. It's a fairly recent time for the Apocrypha to be adopted by the Orthodox churches. Now, of course, we know the Greek, the Russian, but what is the Asian or Oriental? Sometimes it is called Orthodox. There are 6 churches involved in that. Some of them you probably know, like the Coptic Church, which is Egypt and that area. There's the Syrian, there's the Armenian, the Ethiopian, the Etrine, and then the Indian Orthodox. And these are the group that is predominantly using the Apocrypha today. So, yes.
Were they in the group called the Asian?
yeah, the six that I just gave you were called the
Yeah, right.
Asian.
Good.
And then you have the Russian the Russian and the Greek. Yeah, that's because of where they were formed, in Greece and Russia, and then
Good.
Oriental was Northern Africa and places like that.
Is it also called Eastern Orthodox?
Yes, sometimes it's called the Eastern Orthodox. That's right. Okay. Any others?
What does it say? The Apocrypha.
Have you got about a year, 2 years?
Well, could you summation? I mean, is it like the Old Testament and the New Testament? The BC and the AD?
Yes.
Yeah, well, if you look at where it's found in the Bible, in any Bible, our traditional 66 book Protestant Bible, they generally took the Apocrypha and stuck it right between the New and Old Testament. So that's where you would find it in most of the, I'm sorry, I keep wondering. I'll try to remember to stay still.
You're close.
I'm close. I always like to go closer to whoever's asking the question. So I'll have to remember to plant my feet here and not move. But some of the Bibles, the Apocrypha is interspersed throughout. So as an example, first, Daniel, we'll take Daniel. Daniel has 14 chapters to it, but there is a 15th chapter, which is the Apocrypha. And so the Apocrypha, what they do is they're adding two things. So they have a 15th chapter, which deals basically with Daniel in the lion's den. And they stuck it there. So that now, instead of 14 chapters, there's 15 chapters. Other ones just stand by themselves. But most of it deals with, well, all of it deals with Old Testament. There's nothing that deals with the New Testament in the Apocrypha. So I don't know if that answers your question, but next Sunday, I'm going to look at some of the books and try to give you information concerning, when it was written, who wrote it, if we know, and sort of an outline of what the book says. So,
Vulgate interpretation. Where were these documents found in Palestine? Where did they exist? They said they were not in Alexandria, but where in Palestine?
they were in Jerusalem, and they were kept by the Jewish community. That's where we got these. Now, see, I did on how we got the English Bible, right? And I talked about that in terms of all of these various manuscripts that they found, of which there are about 20,000 of these manuscripts. That is more manuscripts to back up the Bible than exists for the Iliad, as an example. There's only 3 manuscripts for the Iliad, but yet we accept the Iliad, as oh, that's the way it was written. So there's a lot of history there to that. These were found originally in Alexandria because of the library that was there. The Pharaoh would gather all these documents. Whenever a ship came into port, they had to give up all of the documents that they had with them. Sailors would have books and things like that. The Egyptians would take those and then they would make a copy. And then they would give the original back to the sailors or whoever. But that's one way they collected from foreign areas. And of course, they got a lot of writings that were in Hebrew. Well, the problem was the Egyptians didn't, speak, didn't understand and write Hebrew. So who knows Hebrew? The Israelites, right? All right, well, we'll ask the Israelites in Egypt to translate this for us into the Greek so we can understand it. Well, the problem was the Jewish people who were living in Egypt, it's been so long that they were there that they didn't know Hebrew. So the Pharaoh had to go to Egypt, or excuse me, to Israel, Palestine, and recruited 70 of the Jewish scholars to come back and translate what he had in Hebrew into the Greek. Well, that's where we get the name Septuagint. Septa means 70. So there were 70 scribes that came back to Egypt. They read the manuscripts and then they translated it into Greek for the Egyptians. Of those 70, actually there were 72, but who counts two extra ones? But these 72 scholars from Palestine or from the Jerusalem area, they were each put into separate rooms. Okay, the Pharaoh took care of them. They had their own separate apartments where they lived, and they were given these documents. They could not talk to each other though, and they would write down what their interpretation of the document was from Hebrew into Greek. Then what happened was once they all 72 did that, they checked. And lo and behold, there was not a single one that was any different from the others. Yeah, they all were perfectly in sync. All 72 of them. So that's sort of another sign that, perhaps we really do have something that came from, the mind of God when he gave it to man for inspiration. Now, how did I get off on this? What was the original question? I forget. I forget who asked it, but anyway, that's how we got then the Old Testament translated from the Hebrew into the Greek. And so some people went to Egypt in order to do translations. Jerome went to Palestine, and that's when he discovered that, hey, over in Egypt, they got 14 extra books. Where should these books go? What are those books? And that's what started the controversy then in terms of, well, are we going to accept these like we do the regular Old Testament and New Testament? Is it legitimate to put them in the Bible? Where should they go in the Bible? As I say, a lot of them, first and second Ezra is really just Ezra. So where did those go? And some of the things had hymns, some had prayers. So where we fit all those. And one of the ways was, well, clearly the one that talks about Daniel, that should probably be in Daniel. Others that we can't really put in should be standalone. But then the question becomes, do we really want to take Daniel and expand it to 15 chapters rather than the 14 that we originally knew about? Well, to solve that, some put it in, some then put it in between the New and Old Testament. And that's typically where you will find most of the Apocrypha that is included in the Bibles is between those two. Did that answer your question? Or I know you want to know more about the books. I promise I'll do that next Sunday. So anyway,
So
yes.
the issue is not necessarily the content of the Apocrypha. It's more when it was found and if it should be added to the Bible.
That question was settled by the Roman Catholics when they said it should be. Others I don't know whether we should believe the Apocrypha or not. First of all, the Apocrypha was not accepted by Protestant churches because of a lot of reasons, and I'll get to those reasons at the very end here. But are they really worthy of being in the Bible? My answer is, I don't believe they should be in the Bible. But I think we can learn a lot from the Apocrypha. The way I look at that, some of the things clearly go against the theology that the Protestant movement has.
Okay.
And I'll go in those in just a moment. But in terms of the value of the Apocrypha, I think that may be what you are asking. What value is it? Well, how many of you have been raised being told or even reading to your own children or grandchildren fairy tales? Grimm's fairy tales, right? Grimm's Brothers, or Schultz's Peanuts, or Dr. Seuss's lyrical make-believe world. Are those inspired words of God? I don't think anybody would, that would be a real stretch to say that those are God inspired, right? That God gave Schultz the idea for and the words that go with it. So the thing is, though, even though we don't include Dr. Seuss in our Bible, can we learn things from it?
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a lot of moral and ethical things. Peanuts the same way. So the Apocrypha, the way that I look at it is, yeah, maybe we should read it and we can learn some things from it. But I don't believe my value is that it belongs in the Bible. If we put the Apocrypha in there, where do we stop then? Because there are a lot of other writings. But when it was canonized, when we did the canonization, there were set rules. And the Apocrypha does not follow those rules. It does not follow those rules. And so should not be included as part of the Bible itself. So, that,
Thank you.
all right, so the exclusion of the Apocrypha. The major exclusion came in 1647 in the Westminster Confession. It excluded the Apocrypha. So that was one thing, was there was this convention called, in which scholars went through the Apocrypha to decide where it should go, if any place. And they decided that it should not be included into our Bible. The British and Foreign Bible Society, they were the ones who published the various Bibles. And they used to publish them with the Apocrypha in it. But they chose not to later on include it. Now, it wasn't because of any convention or any analysis on their part. It was simply they ran out of money. And the Apocrypha was too big to put in there, cost too much. So we'll jettison it. And they followed that. And so that was in the early 19th century, as when the Protestant Bible actually lost then all of the use of the Apocrypha. Today, however, our English Bibles, you can go into Barnes and Nobles or you can go to Amazon or whatever, and you can find the 66 chapter Bible that includes the Apocrypha. It's starting to make a comeback. People are interested. So it's started interested in what it has to say. It's becoming more popular today. So it does come back. What I'm afraid is if it comes back as part of the Bible, might that mislead some people who are, new in the faith or have no faith at all, and they start reading about it's okay to assassinate people and things like that, because the Apocrypha has that. Or it's okay to pray to your grandfather. He'll help you. He's in heaven, so he'll help you. Those are the kind of things that are kind of anti, if you will. It will go against what is in the Bible. Yes, sir.
What you're really saying is the problems are theological, that the Apocrypha has some really different views of our faith than is in the standard Bible.
It has, yes, to a certain extent. That's true. Yeah. But it also sometimes reconfirms what is in our Bible. But I'm picking out some of the things that I think would disqualify it as being in the Bible itself. I have no problem if you want to include it in the Bible, if there's some footnotes that say that this has not been fully accepted by the Protestant denominations. But even that statement isn't quite true, because even the Methodist Church, believe it or not, uses the Apocrypha. How many of you knew that?
What do you mean by use?
I mean it by, in our religious ceremonies, do we read the Apocrypha? And the answer is yes, we do. Where, when? You guys are getting all over where I'm at, but
We're just
All right.
helping.
but I like that. Does everybody know what lexicon is? All right, that is used by the churches. It has a list of accepted readings for different ceremonies or things of that nature that we do at certain times of the year, things like that. There's one lectionary that the Roman Catholics use, and let's see, what it is called. I don't have that down there, but anyway, it's a list of contains a list of collections of the scriptural readings that are appropriate for Christian and also Jewish worship. Okay. Now, as of this date, the Apocrypha are included in lectionaries for the Lutherans and also for the Anglicans. So the Episcopal Church and the Lutheran Church, they used that, and it's part of their religious ceremonies to read from the Apocrypha.
But it's not a part of the Bible.
But it's not well, again, you can get a Lutheran Bible or Anglican Bible, and it may or may not have the Apocrypha on it. But this lectionary is a book that says, here's what you as a priest in the Anglican Church should be reading on this particular occasion. And so they would read it, and it's from the Apocrypha. Their Bible may not have it, or it may have it, because you can buy Bibles with and without. But those are two that have a specific lectionary that prescribes that. Amish. Okay, we'll look at the Amish people. The Amish people actually use Tobias and Sarah. That's a book, Tobias and Sarah. It's a love story. And they read that particular book at their weddings. So if you're Amish and you're participating in the wedding, either as the bride or groom, or, you know, as bridesmaids or best man or something like that. By the way, that's another interesting story, is marriage, you know, all the symbolism that's in it, how we got it. But what happens is that they read this particular book at their particular ceremony of a wedding. What about the Methodist? Does the Methodist use it? I already told you yes, right? There's a thing called the Revised Common Lectionary, and it's what is used by the mainline Protestant religions, of which Methodism is one. They actually use that. So we as Methodists also use the Apocrypha. So does that answer your question, sir?
Which part of it?
Part A. Yes.
I got a foundational question.
Okay,
Reference is always made, when we talk Bible, reference is always made, interpretation, scholars. We hear that term scholars a lot.
mhm.
What I'd like to do is look into, what were those scholars? Were they 95% men over 60? Were they 100% men? In other words, did women have any input at all with scholars?
No.
So women had no input on the Bible.
And that's when the world started going to, you know what? When the women got involved and, no. Yeah, when we refer to biblical scholars, there's both secular and religious scholars. So if you're talking about a biblical scholar, you got to know what we mean by that. Because a secular scholar is probably going to approach it quite differently than a religious scholar.
More science-based as opposed to, the science and religion had this huge battle early on.
That's right. They have very good, very
Huge
good.
battle.
Mhm.
And so you had scholars on this side of the equation, scholars on this side of the equation.
Right.
So.
And you'll always have that. I mean, coming out of academia, even within academia, various scholars in the same discipline disagree.
But I find it interesting that there is so little reference to the role that women played in even selecting even any of the prayers or hymns.
Yeah, that's because, as you mentioned, was it 95% or 100%? Your figures are probably correct in terms of the original interpretations of the Bible. I have a book that looks at all of the different translations and who did it and things like that. And I cannot recall the mention of a single woman. Modern translations, though, do include women. That's right. But the original translations, the Jewish scholars that came to Egypt were all men because they were rabbis. And there were no women rabbis at that time. It's the same way with academia. It was dominated by males. That's because females could not get education. They could not become a part of that academic community. And so they had very little to say. It would have been interesting if it had been reversed. What would the translations be if it was by a lady rather than a man? But Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank
Okay. All right. Anyway, the books, and I'll sort of, because I have to quit what?
Target is quarter till, but let's wrap it up by 10 till. No
Okay,
later than
all right,
10
so
till.
5 minutes. I won't get to look at why the Apocrypha has not been accepted by the mainline traditional Protestants. So that's where I'll start next week. But let me just give you the names and the approximate dates of the writing of the various books that we find there. It's divided really into 3 periods. There is the pre-Maccabean period, and then post. The Maccabees, which is Maccabean, that's how they got that, were a group of people who were very zealous, wanted to go against Rome. And so we can look at the Apocrypha in terms of it being written either pre, during, or post. And it's divided, as I say, into these 3 periods. And the books are, the very first one was 1 Esdra, which was written in 300 BC. And then Tobit, it was written in 200 BC. Then we have the Song of the 3 Children. And we're not quite certain about those dates, probably around 168 BC. But that part of it, there was a hymn, and part of that went into the pre. And then during the Maccabean period, the prayer that we find in the 3 Holy Children, the book called 3 Holy Children, came about. Then we have Judith, which is 150 BC. And then we have an addition to Esther. That's another book. And it's very similar to what Daniel is. That particular one was written in somewhere 140, 130 BC. Then we get into the post. We have, of course, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, written right around 90 to 50 BC. Susanna, not certain about that particular date. That comes in a post. Then we have Bel and the Dragon. That's another book that we find. Again, we don't know exactly the date for that. Then there are the Wisdom book, the Baruch book, 2nd Esdra, and then the Prayer of Manasseh. And those are the 14 books. And so what we will do is next time I will go through why generally the Apocrypha is not accepted by the mainstream Protestant group. And then I'll try to give you a little bit of information about, I don't know if I can get through all 14 of the books, but some of the books. Does anybody have a burning desire? The 14 that I read? What's that?
Will there be a test?
There will definitely be a test. So bring lots of paper and pencils. So does anybody want any particular one? I mean, I sort of saw a Bel and the Dragon.
Yeah.
What happened to the book? What happened to the book of Tobias and Sarah?
Tobias and Sarah. That is found, it's called Tobias and Sarah, but it's in, what is it here? It's under Susanna. But Tobias and Sarah is not a book. Those are characters in that book. And that, of course, since the Amish use them during weddings, what did these 2 do? They got married, but they had a hard time. You know, they had to run away and all that stuff.
Maccabees.
Is it in Maccabee?
Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, Old Testament history bridging with New Testament, the history of the Jews.
Yeah, Well-
Wasn't that significant?
what do you mean in terms of significant?
A bridge.
A bridge?
History of the Judeo-Christian religion. Who were they fighting?
Oh, they were fighting the Romans.
It's just a request.
Yeah. Okay, so Maccabees. And any others? You guys don't care? Okay,
Something unique.
something unique. All right, I'll pick out some unique ones to look at. Did I stop in time?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
kind of,
kind of.
kind of.
That's,
But
that's.
it was a great,
that's
great
typical.
lesson and a lot of interest out here. So
Oh, good.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dean. And we're just always learning, aren't we? So thank you, class. See you next week.